Hey everyone, my name is Kara Beardsell, and this is going to be my older adult oral presentation. I did my presentation through with an interview that I did with a man by the name of James, and I used the intimacy versus isolation stage, which is also the stage of young adulthood, so roughly like ages 18 to 24. Okay. So, some important experiences from the intimacy versus isolation stage that James experienced were the disillusion of his natural family. His parents got divorced. Their family had lived in California. His father took a job in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and subsequently moved the family cross country to take this new job. His mom had grown up in California, born and raised, so Harrisburg, Pennsylvania was kind of a jump for her. And so she was not able to cope well with that, and as such decided to leave her husband and her children and moved back to California. At the same time, James's oldest sister was also going off to college, so James was pretty much the only one left in Harrisburg with his dad. And in that time as well, his father remarries twice. So James now has two new stepmoms, a new stepbrother who James admittedly was not very nice to. James says that that's actually one of his bigger regrets in life, was how mean he was to his stepbrother, but said he was really just kind of reacting from a place of misplaced anger. His father was also an alcoholic and could definitely be described as verbally abusive towards James and his wives and stepchildren and things like that. Another important experience was his acceptance to college and graduation from high school. He was accepted to Kent State University. He did have some self-destructive behavior in college that ultimately resulted in him leaving college and joining the United States Coast Guard, where he then completed 4 years, and he actually notes this as his gateway to success. A note from one of the research articles I used in my annotated bibliography, this particular study done in 2012 suggests two different types of communication style and how that affects children. And James's father's style of communication could be described as conformity orientation, where he expressed negative feelings, he vented, explosive feelings. He had thoughts and expressed them that were very hurtful towards James and other family members. He was verbally aggressive. He acted aggressive towards others. And this actually, because James was exposed to these things, this would have increased his chances of being a perpetrator or a victim in his future intimate relationships. However, this fortunately was not the case for James, and he's been married for 40 years. Some of the challenges and accomplishments that James expressed during this time frame. So some challenges were that he had very little family support. His family did support him financially, his father, but emotionally they just weren't there or helpful towards him. To the contrary, James actually had to be a support to his older sister, who was at college, because she got pregnant while she was in college, and so James had to be the one to let his parents know that they were going to be having the grandchild. He experienced a lot of negative peer pressure as well. So he had made some friends in high school, late his senior year in college, that just weren't the best influence and didn't make the best life choices. And James kind of went right along with them because he didn't have a whole lot of other guidance. The cross country move didn't help James either. That was a big challenge to get over. Moving from one side of the country to the other in your junior year of high school is pretty brutal. His parents' divorce and his father's subsequent remarriages was also a challenge that James faced. And he witnessed a shooting while he was in college, which was also a challenge. He was at Kent State University during the protests that occurred there, and then Ohio National Guard was called in, and students were shot and killed, and he knew people that were wounded and killed in that incident. Some of the accomplishments that James expresses were a graduation from high school with a scholarship in baseball, and this was no small feat given James's home life and how unstable it was, and just his ability to kind of power through that and graduate with a baseball scholarship. His acceptance to Kent State and going there, his success in his senior year of high school, and as I said, the graduation, and then his future success to the United States Coast Guard. As far as factors that inhibited the resolution of the intimacy versus isolation stage, or facilitated. So James identified some inhibitors as his parents' pretty much blatant unwillingness to take responsibility for their actions. They didn't really see anything that they had done as wrong. His father didn't really think he was an alcoholic. His mother didn't see anything wrong with moving the family, or his father didn't see anything wrong with moving the father across country. His mother really saw no issue with picking up and leaving her children and going back to California. So nobody really has ever been sorry for kind of the turmoil that they caused James during that period in his life. Also, the physical distance between his parents, especially with his mom being across country, made it difficult to come to any resolution about that time period and have discussions about it and work through it. His father's continued alcohol use was certainly an inhibitor. Continued to drink, continued to be verbally abusive. That was not a helpful factor, and almost pretty much a preventative factor in bringing any resolution to that stage. His parents expressed little interest in James in his life, even in James into adulthood. Said that, his parents continued to live in separate states. His dad lived in Ohio, his mom was in California, then moved to Tennessee, and James lived in Pennsylvania with his wife and children. And his parents didn't really come visit. They didn't invite James to come visit. They kind of just were pretty happy with their own lives and were okay not having a real close relationship with James. James's mother also lacked emotional intelligence, and James' exact words were, "My mom was a great mom until I turned 10 and we were the same age." So, her ability to cope with and help James emotionally just wasn't a skill that she had. Some of the facilitators in the resolution of that stage were James had a very successful career in the Coast Guard, and he credits them with kind of saving his life in a way and providing him with the structure and routine and almost parenting in a way that he didn't have throughout much of his teenage years and in his young adulthood stage when he really needed parental support and just didn't have it. The Coast Guard was there to give it to him. His eventual marriage, he has been married twice. The first wife that he had, they were married less than a year. And then his second wife, he's been married to her for 40 years. So having a successful marriage has really resolve some of his past hurt feelings. His children and grandchildren, and as he said, being the father I didn't have and the grandfather my children didn't have. He's kind of been able to resolve his feelings from that stage by being what his father and his mother were not. Other positive life experiences, and just James says he's had a really great life. He's got great memories. He loves his family. His children and grandchildren are very close. They've taken wonderful family vacations together, and he says his positive memories far outweigh his bad memories. And he's had a very successful career. A very successful businessman, loves what he does, is good at what he does, and that has been something that has given him pride, and also it's something that his father took pride in. So James's dad actually in his aging years expressed a lot of pride in James for how successful his career was, and so that's something that's really been a healing factor and helped to resolve some of that stage for James. As far as issues of diversity, this was a little bit harder for James to identify because James is a white male in his late 60s, and he certainly acknowledges that the fact that he is a white male gives him, a benefit that he probably admits he has taken advantage of. He says he's been shielded from a lot of oppression and things that other people may face, and he could not really recall a lot of details about or think of a lot of examples of where diversity has really come in to affect him directly. But one thing he did note was his socioeconomic status. James, as I said, is a white male in his late 60s. He grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Well, he grew up in California and then Harrisburg. And he said his whole life he was really surrounded by, affluent or middle class individuals who were of the same race and ethnicity of him, but that probably actually helped him because he would get into trouble because he, again, caved into peer pressure. And he recalled several incidences where his father was making a trip to the police station in Harrisburg to discuss with the police why James shouldn't be in further trouble for anything. And James notes that his socioeconomic status and perhaps his skin color and his gender helped in perhaps alleviating some further punishment that he could have had happen had he not had those things. And so he certainly he's unsure of what the outcome would have been with his father's interventions in other situations. But he said he did, it makes him think now, like if he was of a different socioeconomic class or different ethnic or racial makeup, would that have affected how he was treated? With regards to oppression in James's life, again, James did not really recall any major issues of oppression against him personally. However, one thing he did talk about was the violence that he witnessed at Kent State. And he noted that he felt like he was witnessing oppression. It was during a peaceful protest, which he described it as peaceful protest, against government action that the students of Kent State were exhibiting. And the Ohio National Guard was called in to control some of it, and shots were fired at some point during the National Guard's stay at Kent State. 13 were injured and 4 were killed, and he knew some of those students, both injured and killed. And, he said he really feels that the students were being oppressed for their beliefs against military action that was taking place. And that was a big factor, a big event for him, and an impacting factor for him. Looking at James's life through the multi-system lens, so from the social lens, James's girlfriend and eventual wife, they were a very positive influence in his learning and his development. His girlfriend was driven. She's an honor student. She finished college, became a French teacher, and, it was really something that he kind of aspired to have, that drive, he said, so she was a great influence for him. Perhaps something that hindered him a bit were his friends, because again, as I had said before, they were teenage boys and they didn't make the brightest decisions all the time. And James was all for decisions that weren't the brightest, he says, when he was younger. So he describes himself as rambunctious. So they were something that could have hindered him in his, through the social lens. His family was more of a hindrance, unfortunately, than a help. He said he really lacked support from them other than financial, which he admits was huge, but he didn't have any emotional support from them, really. Witnessing to his father's alcoholism and experiencing the verbal abuse that he did, he felt that they weren't really there for him to provide the stable environment that he needed growing up. And he turned to his friends then to kind of, for family, basically. And that was a hindrance. So it was a kind of a cycle that he got stuck in. Another lens, another part of that multi-system lens would be his community. And baseball was a big thing for him. He was a great baseball player. He got a scholarship to college to play baseball. And his coaches really provided the guidance he wasn't getting at home. They gave him an outlet to escape from a chaotic home life. And it was something he enjoyed and helped in pursuing his aspirations and dreams. Kent State was something that both helped and hindered him. So it helped him because he enjoyed it and he made lifelong friends. And he's got really great stories from his college years and times that he just, was laughing even recalling them, and had a lot of fun with his college buddies. But that was also, a hindrance because he abused substances while he was there, and some of that was with those same buddies. He also witnessed that shooting, those protests. That was something that hindered him, he felt like. But one thing that helped him was his career in the Coast Guard, and Kent State is what really led him there. And then the Coast Guard, he credits as a positive force in his life, and that really helped him tremendously. He credits that institution and his wife with pretty much saving his life, as they both kind of insisted and forced him to grow up a little bit, make better choices, and get his life back on track, and just pointed him in a positive direction. He said he could have very likely ended up down a much darker road had he not left Kent State and joined the Coast Guard when he did.